I'm going to read you a random passage, and I want you to try to guess, see how many words it takes for you to guess where this passage I'm reading is coming from, okay? It's got a style of writing that is probably familiar to you. So let me just pick a passage here and see if you can figure it out. All right, a good name is better than precious ointment. Wow, it didn't take you very long. Wow. A good name is better than precious ointment in the day of death and the day of one's birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. You guessed that right away, didn't you? You're wrong. Turn to our text in Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Why does that sound like the book of Proverbs? Because it's got the same author. Exactly. Who is that author? Solomon wrote many of the Proverbs, and he also wrote Ecclesiastes. So there's a style of writing here that is very familiar, and if I don't tell you where I'm reading from, most of us, myself included, would have said, I'm just reading one of the Proverbs to you. So now that I have you where I want you, let's look again at Ecclesiastes chapter 7. A good name is better than precious ointment in the day of death and the day of one's birth. Now, as we're reading through these verses, you might get the feeling like Solomon is in a bad state of mind. He is writing in a style that depicts the vanity, the vain thinking of his day. So be patient. Verse 2, it's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Gift there meaning a bribe. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. So he brings all these contrasts showing the vain thinking of mankind. And then he says this in verse 9, which is the crux of our lesson today as we discuss the attitude of anger. Any of you struggle with anger? Be not hasty, verse 9 says, in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. Solomon was no dummy. If you want to read a great biography, a short biography of a great man, you ought to look at 1 Kings chapter 3 and chapter 4. It talks about Solomon, how he came to reign. In verse 12 of chapter 3, the Bible says that God himself gave Solomon a wise and an understanding heart. And then that wisdom is on full display in chapter 4. In verse 29, we are told that God gave to Solomon an exceeding amount of wisdom and understanding. I mean, more than he even needed, more than anybody needs. The very next verse says he was wiser than all the children of the east country. Now that means it wasn't that you take all these people in this continent and compare them one by one, and Solomon, I'd be wiser than him, wiser than him, wiser than him, yeah, wiser than him. No, if you take the collective wisdom of all the people in the east country, Solomon was wiser than all the collective wisdom of all those people. To remove all doubt, the next verse, 31, says he was wiser than all men. In verse 32, we are told that he wrote 3,000 proverbs. What are proverbs? Wise sayings. So he had a bunch of things bouncing around in his head, but he wrote down over 3,000. Now, we have some of them included for us in the book of Proverbs in the Bible, but he had a lot more to say than what's recorded in the book of Proverbs. He wrote 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. You got to be pretty wise to write songs as well. The last verse of that chapter, 1 Kings chapter 4, says that the people and kings of foreign countries would travel miles around, probably on camel, horseback, maybe some on foot, to travel to Jerusalem just for the privilege to sit under Solomon's teaching. Just to listen to what he had to say. Travel great distances, go through a lot of trouble and effort, take time out of their schedules because his wisdom was so well known that they just wanted to sit and just see what he had to say. You can imagine that kind of wisdom. He was a man that knew a lot, a man that had an understanding that came from God himself. So whatever Solomon had to say to his generation, and certainly has to say to our generation, is worth listening to. And here's what this wise man said. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. The words anger or angry are often found in combination with two other powerful human emotions. One of them is frustration, and the other one, aggression, because it can turn into aggressive behavior. I got to experience that this morning a little bit. Got home from a busy day yesterday, and my wife was doing a load of laundry, and I said, oh, just a minute. I want to throw my dirty clothes in, and we do that. Take care of it all at once. And I reached into my pockets of those shorts I was wearing when we were washing cars, took everything out of my pockets in the front, threw those shorts into the dirty clothes, and what did I forget to take out? My wallet. I've never done that before, Jim. Pray for my wife. She's in store for some rough roads ahead. I don't know how I forgot that. I've never allowed that to happen before. In fact, the thought of it happening just would make me cringe. Well, I got up this morning to go to church, and I'm putting all my pen and my wallet. Where's my wallet? And I'm thinking the worst. It's like a woman losing her purse, all those important things. And where's my wallet? And I went to search places where I thought it might be, and I said, surely I didn't leave it in my shorts when I threw that in the dirty clothes. So my wife went out. If I'd have thought sooner, she'd just thrown them in the dryer this morning. The dryer was finishing up as I thought about that. But she went out. When she pulled some clothes out of the dryer and I saw my debit card pop out on the ground, I knew I was in trouble. My wallet was in shreds. It was just, between the wash and the dry and the leather, and it was old anyway, it was falling apart. It just came apart in pieces, and all of the stuff. Oh, you know me. Can you just imagine? I'm supposed to get up in front of some sweet people, all of my friends at church, and teach about your problem with anger, and I just let my wallet go through the washer and dryer. And I'm just thinking, I had important papers and stuff in there, and one of them being my medical card and another cardboard medical card, and just I'm beside myself thinking, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't get angry because that would make me a hypocrite to come to church and tell you why you shouldn't be angry. And and honey, I did pretty good, didn't? See, look at that. You heard it. I didn't get angry at all, at least not outwardly. It didn't reach the aggression stage where I'm throwing my wallet or pieces of the wallet against the wall and everything. So I just kind of left it out to dry and we'll have to deal with it when I get home. These situations come around all the time. And anger is one of those emotions that, some things children struggle with. It doesn't come till a little later in life. In fact, children, with their innocence, they don't know what covetousness or greed, or not to a large degree. When they get in the nursery, they're learning it. But when they're little babies, they don't learn any of that. In fact, a child cannot love a parent like a parent loves a child. I mean, a baby. A baby cannot love its parents like a parents love that, because they've not yet learned those emotional responses to situations like that. But one thing a child picks up early in life is this emotion of anger. Those of you who had children know what I'm talking about. Some more than others. I mean, they just pick it up. When a child doesn't have its basic needs met, the big one is hunger. When they get hungry, well, they can't verbally say, "Hey, mom, can you have a bottle?" They can't say that. So they just sort of wait. When they don't get what they want, they said, "Well, this is how this works." We cry. When we cry, we get what we want. If a child needs to be changed, maybe we don't know that, Not that I change a lot of diapers with my kids, but my wife may not know that. But when the child begins to cry, she says, okay, checklist. Is he hungry? Has he been changed? Is he tired? Those are the three big ones. If you take care of those three things, you're good to go. They shouldn't be crying. But some kids, Luke was one of them, they didn't like to go to bed. So even though they need to go to, you never struggle with that problem. Pastor Joel's children like to go to bed. My kids did not. So, when you put them in their crib and they don't want to be there. They want to be with the parents. They can just throw a fit. I had a brother that did something very unique. I'm going to explain it to you and ask if any of you have ever heard of anybody in your lifetime doing this. But my brother, baby brother, I had 5 younger brothers, so I watched this process go through, 5 times. I watched the little kids cry and scream when they don't get their way. We say throw a fit. That's an expression that's associated with leprosy, not epilepsy, not leprosy, epilepsy. But we say, he was throwing a fit. That means they're really nothing hurting them. They're not being, neglected, but they just cry and scream because they don't get their way. And I had a brother who did this to an extreme degree. He would scream and cry. My mother was out of the house by then, and my dad, you could describe my dad with a lot of different adjectives. One of them would not be sympathetic. He was not a sympathetic parent. And with all these 8 boys, he didn't really have to be, But when they would cry like that, my dad would often say, older siblings want to rush in and solve the problem, right? Leave him alone, leave him alone. And he would say this, I've heard this 100 times. When he gets tired enough, he'll stop crying. And that usually works. The kids cry and cry, when they're in bed, cry. All of a sudden you go peek on them and they're crashed out, asleep in the bed. They just want to cry because they want to get out. Well, my brother took that to an extreme degree. He would throw a fit. He would scream. He would emotionally get so angry, and he would scream at the top of his lungs. His face would turn red. He'd open his mouth wide open and bellow and scream. And then after a while, I have to get a breath. Well, when he did that, he would scream so loud and so long. When he took that big gulp of breath he needed, he would swallow his tongue. I don't know if anyone ever heard that before. Anybody ever heard that happening before? Wow. See, this is unique. We got to get a name for this. Call it Kenny syndrome or something. I don't know what it is. I hope my brother Kenny doesn't hear this. I might be seeing him this fall. But he would scream, and then he'd exhaust all of his oxygen, and when he breathed in, he'd swallow his tongue. So what would happen is, he'd cut off his breath. He would a lot of bad things would happen at that point. He would stop crying, which was good, but he would stop breathing, which was bad. And his face would turn white, and his eyes would flutter back, and he looked like he was dying. He basically looked like he was dying. He probably was dying. Well, you can imagine all the siblings. We're rushing in, and we're trying to make sure everything's okay. We thought he was going to die on us right there in the house. And my dad, who was a paramedic, and he was very unsympathetic, had a different approach to this. When my brother did that, he would go over there, reach in, pull his tongue out of his throat, and then make us get away from him. He had us all back away. Leave him alone, back away, leave him alone. And he would leave him there lying there on the carpet or bed or whatever it was, and he would start breathing again, and he would come to, and of course he's like disoriented. I'm talking a little 2-3-year-old kid. He's trying to figure out, what am I doing here? Where was I? What's happening? And that process was repeated a few times until he learned that he wasn't going to get what he wanted. Now, you see, your dad was a maniac. What kind of father would do that? A father who would not want him to throw a fit like that, swallow his tongue in another setting, and not have anybody nearby to know what was wrong with him. That's what kind of father would do that. He was a paramedic. He understood all those things. And he didn't let us sympathize with our brothers, or Ken in particular, when he had a fit like that, because it was going to, in the long run, hurt him. You say, that is pretty extreme. Yes, it was. There's something about watching your younger brother lose his ability to breathe, pass out, his eyes are fluttering, his body is rigid, and then coming back, to the land of the living. That was unsettling for us as younger kids. But I know of some adults who act just as immaturely when they get really, really angry. I mean, they do really crazy things when they get in. They have names for it. You ever been involved in road rage? I have a friend in our church who was driving down Blackstone Avenue, and somebody was in a hurry and he wasn't going to move out of his way, and he came around the side of him and he pulled out a revolver and pointed at him. And I said, "What did you do?" He says, "Well, I backed up and let him get in front of me." That's probably the smart thing to do. There's nutty people like that will shoot you because they get so angry, they just see red. Anger is a huge problem today. And it's associated with other problems. It begins with a verbal, what is it, proverb? Solomon didn't write this one, but somebody said, he who has a sharp tongue will cut his own throat. People will say things that they'll regret, but worse than that is that aggression that comes out in people. They'll physically act out on people. And so we need to be careful about anger. So let me give you a dictionary definition real quick. It's a strong passion or emotion of displeasure excited by a sense of injury or insult. It's interesting that Ephesians 4:26 says this, be ye angry. Be ye angry. It's saying that there are some settings in life that warrant that emotion in our lives. We ought to be angry at some things. I used to work with teenagers, and we used to sing a little echo song. I'd sing it to them, the devil and me, and they'd sing the devil and me, and I'd say, we both agree. We both agree. The devil and me, we both agree. The devil and me, we both agree. I hate him, and he hates me. And then we say, all our sins are washed away. If you sing that song, with teenagers. That was a kind of a song. And really, we ought to be angry with the devil. If you stop and take a look at what he is doing in people's lives, it is wrong for the believer to take a passive, indifferent approach to the things that the devil is doing in people's lives. We ought to be angry. He is out to kill and destroy and to steal. That's the devil's purpose in life. And some people don't even acknowledge the devil's presence or believe in a devil. And some Christians are not aware of the damage that he is inflicting upon people, saved and lost alike. We ought to get angry at times with the devil. We ought to get angry with the system the devil has put in place in our world, all the evil and injustice being done in this world. That ought to make us angry. We ought to be angry with the false religions of our day. I was doing some yard work this past week, and these two guys in white short-sleeve shirts and knit slacks, dress shoes with a badge, black badge over their, their shirt, were coming by, and they said, "Hey, can we help you?" I'm looking at them like, I'm all dirty and sweaty, and they got these nice white shirts. I said, "No, I appreciate the offer, but." I don't want you guys to get all dirty, And they said, well, can we share some things about Jesus? I said, I'd like to hear about Jesus, but I should warn you ahead of time that the Jesus I serve is different than the Jesus you serve. And they look kind of confused, but they were with me so far. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, the Jesus that I serve is the Lord and creator of the universe. He is mankind's only hope for salvation. He is my Lord and my personal Savior. And he is not, I said this, maybe you say I shouldn't, but I said, he is not the brother of Lucifer, which is what the Mormon Church teaches. Well, I don't know where they got that wacky. That's something from science fiction or Joseph Smith or something, that he's the brother of Lucifer. When I said that to them, they looked like they just walked into a wall, and they looked at me, and they looked at each other, and they turned around and walked away. I said, well, I'd be happy to engage in conversation if you want to talk about my Jesus. They just kept on walking. And I don't want to be rude to people, but you know what? I am going to tell you, I get angry when I see people that I love and know get engaged in false teaching. I get very angry about that. I get angry at the system and the devil behind the system that puts people on a road to destruction when they think they're going to heaven because of their false religions. Moses was angry with Pharaoh. Jesus was angry with the Pharisees. Abraham Lincoln was angry with slavery. There are times in our lives that we should get angry. And the idea of a Christian who just goes through life passively and never gets upset about anything is not found in the Word of God. There are some things we should be, if you want to call it, righteously indignant about. But when it falls into the category of sin, we have to be careful. We need to discern the difference. We need to be angry with the right person. Our anger ought to be felt with the appropriate force. You don't just go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in a second, you know. You have to exert the right amount of emotion in those situations. It should be expressed at the right time. In personal relationships, there are times that are better than others to deal with delicate issues in your family relationships, with your spouse, with your children, with your parents. There's sometimes a better time to deal with certain things that come up. And it should happen, most importantly, with the right purpose or motive in mind. If I'm going to be angry, I should ask myself, why am I angry? Is this justifiable? Should I really be angry in this situation? We've all experienced and learned the hard way that sometimes we get angry at the wrong person. Those people, by the way, on the customer service line that you get frustrated with, of course, after you made the hold for 30 minutes just to get to a live voice, I can see how you'd be a little frustrated, but they're probably not even stockholders in the company. They're just there to answer the phone and deal with people like us. And sometimes those people that are in the customer service lines and these phones, they're the victims of verbal abuse many times, and they don't even, and they can't even say, hey, sir, why don't you just, take a couple aspirin and go to bed and grow up. And they can't say that because they're going to lose their job if they say that to people. But they have to take all that abuse. And really the problem you have is not with the customer service agent, it's with the company's policies. And so we have to be careful that we don't get mad at the wrong person or express that anger at the wrong time. And sometimes things can really make us angry in life. I looked at the life of Job this past week and admired this man. He had health issues. He lost all of his family members. Can you imagine that? I was looking at Tyler's picture on that monitor and just thinking back to that little boy grew up. I knew that little boy when he was just a little preschooler and watched him grow up. And the grief that parents go through when they lose their children. He had friends that came over that tried to find a reason behind all this suffering, and they said, you must have done something wrong. Let's figure out what it is, I would have showed those friends the door. I said, you know what, you're not helping me. You're not helping this. Why don't you guys, I appreciate your visit, but move on. I don't need to hear it. This is just making me, and then his wife comes along and she says, why don't you just curse God and die? It's amazing to me, Job's response in those situations, he never lashed back at his wife. He never told his friends to hit the road. He never got angry with God. In fact, later he would say this, though he, God, slay me, yet will I trust in him. He kept this tremendous attitude. He kept his anger, under wraps. Romans 8:28 is great, isn't it? It's a great verse until it affects us, until it is we who are going through our rough patch or our valley in life. All of a sudden, it's sort of hard to practice Romans 8:28 when the problem resides on our lap. It's easy to quote it to other people when difficulties come our way. Sooner or later, in one way or another, something's going to go wrong or somebody's going to offend you, and you can respond in different ways. You can hurt the person the same way that he hurt you. That's called retribution. You do that to me, I'm going to do that to you. You can hurt the person more than you've been hurt, and that's called revenge. You can ignore the person completely, and that's called indifference, or you can forgive that person. I guess you can call that Christianity. By the way, that's going to be our last time. We're going to finish this series of messages next Sunday, Lord willing, in Sunday school. We're going to talk about an unforgiving spirit, something we all struggle with as well. And if you want to be a real Christian, be willing to forgive people rather than get angry at them. At Yellowstone National Park, there was a ranger taking a group on a tour in the park and stopping at various places, and he was talking about, somebody asked questions about bear. He says, well, there are bears here. A lot of our bears are more tame than completely out in the wild, and for that reason you have to be careful leaving food out and so forth. And somebody said, what's the most dangerous bear here? What do you think he would say? Grizzly bear. Most of you know that. He said, the grizzly bear is the most ferocious animal here at this park. He says, however, just out of curiosity, I'm going to ask you, there's one animal, and only one animal, that the grizzly bear will not act aggressively toward. And he said to that group, does anybody know what that animal is? and some people gave suggestions, but nobody got it right. I, however, have a brighter audience before me than that park ranger did, and I'm convinced somebody's going to get this right. If I asked you, what's the only animal that a grizzly bear will allow into his presence without acting aggressively toward? In fact, the ranger said this animal will eat in the presence of a grizzly bear, and the grizzly bear won't even go after its food. Anybody want to tell me what that is? Badger? No? What is it? Oh, no. Karen, what'd you say? A skunk. Grizzly bears want nothing to do with skunks. Now, they could rip them to pieces if they could catch them. They could do a lot of damage, but they have found that it's not worth it. In the long run, it's not quite worth it to do that. You know, there are some situations we're going to face in life. You can get angry if you want to, but you're going to find that it's not worth it. It's not going to be worth it in the long run. And a grizzly bear has learned that by experience. So, secondly, how does anger affect us? I'm going to give an example of in the Old Testament, a man by the name of King Nebuchadnezzar. He had a dream. He wanted to figure out what this dream meant. It troubled him. It was a reoccurring dream. He wanted to know what it meant. So he called all his wise astrologers and wise men in, and he said, "Tell me what this dream means." And they could not do it. So there might be a lot of different responses. You might say, "Well, I'm going to go to option B. If that didn't work, these wise men that are in my cabinet can't do it. I'll try something else or go somewhere else," or just say, I guess I'll never really have the definition unless God gives it to me. That's not how he responded. Does anybody remember how Nebuchadnezzar responded when his wise men could not tell him the interpretation of the dream? He said, "Kill them all." I think he had an anger problem. I think you probably had kill them all, kill all those wise men. That was his response to situations when he got frustrated. And sometimes we'll get frustrated or angry with others. Sometimes we'll get frustrated with ourselves. Like when you throw your wallet in the washing machine. I couldn't even blame my wife for that one. It would have been more convenient if I could have, but that was my own stupidity. I would have never blamed my wife for that anyway. But sometimes we get angry with ourselves. Sometimes we direct that anger. Maybe it's our own fault, our own stupidity, our own lack of judgment. We get angry at the people we love the most. We get angry with a spouse, with a child, with a friend, with a sibling. But the reality is, if enough frustration builds up in our hearts and our minds, it doesn't have to be somebody we know. You could bottle all of that up, and on your commute to work tomorrow morning, just some innocent person next to you, if they do something that you don't think they should do, you can direct that anger towards a complete stranger. And you confront people like that all the time on the road. I want to say this, the problem is probably not you. And if it is, you need to drive a little more carefully, I guess. But, we all make mistakes, right? Some of us more than others. But really, the real issue is that person had issues in his or her heart long before that you got up yesterday or last week or next week to go to work. They're harboring all these things in their heart, and you happen to be the person in line. Anger will affect us physically. It'll harm our relationships, obviously. It may lead to extreme forms of aggression or aggressive behavior towards other people. It will cloud your judgment, and it will most certainly affect your relationship with God. In fact, Matthew 5:22 says this, "Whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment." Like I said before, anger is appropriate in some situations, but you better have a reason behind it, and it should not be a selfish motive. If there's a sense of right or wrong that you want to stand for, that's different. But even then, be careful how extreme, the setting that you do that. It's always best if you're someone that does something to hurt you like that you pull that person aside privately. Not confront them or embarrass them in front of other people. That's just a little wisdom. I just throw that out as a morsel to you. You can take it and do what you want with it, but it's better to take that person alone and deal with that issue. Now, here's the crux of the lesson, okay? How can we overcome anger? We'll have our points on the board. I'm going to go through these quickly, so if you want to write these down and these scripture references, it may help you. Here's how we can overcome anger. 5 steps. Do your best to avoid situations that lead to anger. Do your best to avoid situations. Do we have those points? Oh, they're right here. That lead to anger. Here's an example for me. For me, I get angry watching the news. You may be fine with it, but I don't know what it is about me. I just get, I don't know. I just get angry. I get angry at the slant that we're being presented with the media and the things that they decide to report on. And even when they report factually or accurately the things that they tell us that people do, sometimes, oftentimes, most times, make me angry. So I had to make a decision about that years ago. Now it's probably been, Lisa, 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago? I don't know how long it's been. I don't watch the news. I don't listen to the news. I'll turn on the news radio for a few minutes, and as soon as the first article comes on that starts to irritate me, I'll turn it off. I listen to things I need things that soothe my mind, give me peace. Not that kind of, so I am intentionally and innocently ignorant about current events. I don't know what's going on in our world. And I should know. I'm a pastor. I should know what's going on. People come up and engage in conversation. So what do you think of this? And I'll say, think of what? And they'll look at me like, you just crawl from under a rock? What do you mean? Haven't you heard about that? No, tell me what's happened. And I don't know. It's a trade-off that I'm willing to live with at this stage of my life. And for the last 25 years, it's worked for me. Avoid situations when you can. If you have an irritating boss, you can't always avoid all those situations, but as much as you can, avoid situations that make you angry. Colossians 3:8, but now you also put off all these things. The first thing on the list is anger. Put away situations in your life where you find yourself getting angry. Try to avoid them. Number 2, when you feel anger coming on, proceed cautiously. James 1:19 says that we should be slow to wrath. Slow. Don't go from 0 to 60 in a second. I mean, if something's making you angry, take time to reflect. Ask yourself those questions I shared with you. Is this a good time to approach this? Is this person really responsible for my anger? How can I handle this situation the best way? Just be slow. A lot of people are just fly off the handle. There are some people you're going to meet out there, perhaps this week, that you just say one thing or do one thing and they're ready to just jump down your throat. So we don't want to be that person. Okay? Proceed cautiously. And again, James 1:19 says, be slow to wrath. Thirdly, practice the art of self-control. Proverbs 16:32. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. Solomon also wrote those words. Capturing an entire city in a military conquest is a great thing, but ruling your own spirit or keeping your anger back is even better, according to this wise sage named Solomon. Number 4, don't allow anger to develop to a point of sin. Even if you believe you're justified in righteous indignation, there's a limit to what God would want you to do to express that anger towards the situation. It doesn't give us the freedom just to go crazy on somebody or just tell somebody all of our mind. We have to be cautious here. So don't allow anger to develop to a point of sin. Again, Ephesians 4:26 says, be ye angry and sin not. It's okay in some situations, and you should be angry. But don't allow it to pass into the category where we're sinning against God and against that person. And then finally, number 5, refuse to nurture the anger in your life. Some people have concluded that their personality trait enables them and allows them to be angry with whomever they want, whenever they want. And they'll say things like this. Well, I'm just a choleric. A what? Haven't you studied the 4 temperaments? I'm a choleric. And if you look under my temperament, a choleric is a person who is angry, assertive, doesn't take guff from anybody. I mean, and that's so, God made me that way. God made me that way, so I'm justified in my anger towards someone. Or, I'm sorry, but I just grew up in a home where my dad had some issues. Luke says that all the time. My dad had some issues. And so I'm just a byproduct of my upbringing, you know. My dad was whacked out of his mind with Mormons that came in the neighborhood, you know. And so I have a hard time, you know, dealing with them, whatever. You know, it's easy for us to justify. If you live with a wife that I had, you'd be angry too. You know, we say stuff like that all the time. And we're justifying it. Refuse to nurture the anger in your life, because verse 26 of Ephesians 4 goes on to say, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. That's a great verse. Ephesians 4:20. If you have an issue with anger, well, we all do. If you struggle with anger, type out or write out Ephesians 4:26 in its entirety. Put on your refrigerator, your bathroom mirror, your car dash, wherever you can get. Put a 3x5 card in your pocket, and that'll be a tremendous verse to help us to keep that in check. And Lord willing, when you throw your wallet in the washing machine and all the ensuing problems associated with that, you won't be angry either. Amen? What are you laughing like that for, Pastor Joel? My wife just testified that I was very accepting of the situation, at least externally. Father, we thank you